So over these past few months, I've tried exploring different theories for various movies because ever since I made my very first theory on this channel, I've become fascinated with how one theory can expand the world of that specific movie or show. But every so often, there's that one theory that might just rip your favorite movies or shows into pieces. And this might be one of them. It's time to delve this newfound love for theories into the world of Spongebob. In the long 22 years that this show has been running, there have been some insane amount of theories created to try and make sense of this world. There's a theory that each character represents one of the deadly sins. Another suggests that each character is constantly on a specific drug. Another one proposes the idea that the secret formula is crab meat. So that would make Mr. Krabs a murderer and a cannibal. And only one of those is surprising.
Something ain't quite right.
What do you mean, Mr. Krabs?
His head's sticking out!
Honestly, this theory is pretty believable, but if there is more than just one secret ingredient, I'd also believe that Mr. Krabs put some of that white magical powder in these patties. And nope, I'm not talking about sugar, people. If you know, you know. But neither one of those theories is the focus of today's video. The one theory that really stuck with me was the geographical location of Bikini Bottom. I'm sure many of you have heard this theory already, but if you haven't, between the years of 1946 and 1958, there were 23 nuclear devices detonated at various spots on, within, above, or beneath Bikini Atoll. And well, because of this intense amount of nuclear tests, that whole area of Bikini Atoll is still uninhabitable. And you can only imagine what that radiation did to the animals that inhabited that area at the time. Perhaps that radiation was the cause of mutations in these starfish and crabs and whales and octopuses. And yeah, I looked it up. It's not octopi, it's octopuses, or it can also be octopodes. English is confusing. And sponges and squirrels and squirrels? Yeah, I'll get back to her in just a second. But the point is, SpongeBob and his friends were all the result of these nuclear tests. Because they were in direct contact with radiation, they now have the ability to communicate and have a job and own a house, you know, human stuff. And that's pretty much the whole theory. It's honestly such a good theory that we can pretty much say that it's fact. It's part of SpongeBob's history, and if you need further proof, the timing matches up. There are 10 main characters in this show, and they can all be classified within 3 categories: BBA, DBA, and ABA, before, during, and after Bikini Atoll. Atoll? So we have most of our characters in this last category. After Bikini Atoll, SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Gary, Pearl, and Sandy. But there's something fishy going on with Sandy. We'll get to her later. 2 of our 10 main characters were born during the times these nuclear tests were going on, and those 2 characters are Mrs. Puff and Mr. Krabs. But our last character, the only character to be born prior to the disaster, he is the only character out of all these 10 that had to endure all 12 excruciating years of these nuclear explosions. And that character is no other than Plankton. Born in 1942, he was only 4 years old when these experiments started taking place. That helps put things into perspective, doesn't it? There's just one slight problem with this theory.
SpongeGar and Patar no got malanga palinka.
The SpongeBob universe dates back years, centuries even. How can that be possible once we have placed this theory as fact? Even the creators of the show have hinted that this theory is the only reason why SpongeBob and the rest of the characters exist. There is absolutely no way these characters have mutated ancestors just as they are years and years ago. And you're right. There's absolutely no way they had ancestors that look like this, like they do. I mean, it would make sense if their ancestors looked something like this, since it was prior to testing. We do have characters born before the explosions after all, Plankton being one of them. I'm sure he was simply just plankton in the sea who changed into this highly intelligent sea creature due to the contamination in the ocean during that time. But Patrick's, SpongeBob's, and Squidward's ancestors were not exposed to that radiation, so what's going on here? Do the characters not know the truth of their existence? I mean, surely Plankton, who was born before it, and Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff, who were born in the midst of the action, know the truth of their existence. They experienced it firsthand. Well, actually, Mrs. Puff was just born at the end of the nuclear test, so I'm sure she wouldn't have remembered any of it, but Mr. Krabs was 10 years old at the end of it, and Plankton was 16 years old. If anything, Plankton would have remembered and told the whole world the truth. And honestly, Krabs wasn't that young. I think I would have remembered an event of that scale at 10 years old. But then one particular episode came to mind.
Morning already?
Plankton, with another one of his bizarre inventions, easily controls SpongeBob with his own brain. Actually, there's a few more episodes that come to mind. Remember when Squidward told SpongeBob to clear his mind, and many SpongeBobs inside SpongeBob's brain literally cleared his mind that he forgot his own name? Oh, and remember the time SpongeBob introduced Patrick to a book and he sucked up all the information that his brain literally started to grow and grow and grow until he could no longer fit through the door. And that time that Patrick fell off a cliff and became smart? Well, my point is that the brains of these characters are so easily manipulated. And my theory is that someone has manipulated these characters into thinking that they are not the first to exist, that they have been around for years and they are just typical sea creatures. And they did the same with Plankton and Mr. Krabs. That is why they haven't said anything after all these years. But who would do this? I think you'll have a pretty good idea where I'm going with this. I mean, think about it. What are humans notoriously known for? Disruption and destruction in the name of science. They concluded these nuclear tests, and of course, they had to run some more tests, but not as they were before. Now they had to run tests on life after a nuclear disaster in that area, and that is when they discovered Bikini Bottom. This was a fascinating discovery for scientists, and they knew that if they went down there and made it known that they were running experiments on them, they may run into the risk of having a large percentage of error, and that is not what they want. So what did they do? They sent down a highly intelligent land critter down to Bikini Bottom to make sure that everything was going according to plan. And nope, it wasn't Sandy Cheeks. She wasn't even around during that time in 1958. Remember, she was born in 1981. But you know who could have possibly been around during that time? Her father, Paw Cheeks. One of two things are possible here. Scientists up here on Earth injected her father with nuclear contaminants in hopes of creating creatures like the ones in Bikini Bottom, or her parents were on the island during that time. Either way, being sneaky, a liar, and a manipulator is most likely part of the family business, because after Paw Cheeks retired, Sandy was the one to take over. Her and her family have been manipulating Bikini Bottom all these years to make them believe they have ancestors just like them. That's why all the characters from way back then look exactly like their present selves, because it's just all a part of their imagination. It's not real. They are living a fabricated life in the name of science, but why? Why would they want them to think any of this? Why did they want these sea creatures to live a life of lies? everything boils down to control. That's their number one reason. Without being in control, they would all get curious. Word would spread about the nuclear test and chaos would overpower their experiments. And Sandy Cheeks would have failed her mission.
Day 1 of behavioral study of subjects in Bikini Bottom. Initiating observations. Now!
Why don't we grow a little? If I love you and you love me, let's plant a seed, watch it grow into a tree, baby.